Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for attending this session. We are going to talk about risk. Risk, which is not a new word. Actually, it's been around for 5 centuries, at least in the French language. So risk is a word that has a few roots, one of which is linked to the Italian word Rexecode, which means removing by cutting. But today, in the upcoming session, neither are we going to talk about removing or cutting anything. It's rather about taking risk. Is it worth taking the risk? That is the question European savers ask themselves when considering investing their money in the financial markets. And why does it matter to take it? That's up to our experts today to discuss the question. And this is where our discussion begins today. So I'm therefore very pleased to welcome on stage, from left to right, Carmine di NOIA, Director for Financial and Enterprise Affairs at OECD, Bruno BEZARD, partner of Cathay Capital, Philippe SETBON, Chairman of AFG and Chief Executive Officer of Natixis Investment Managers, and Olivier Vignat, Deputy Chief Executive Officer of Paris Europlace. Well, gentlemen, thank you for taking part in this session. Let's kick off this session with a bit of context. So since the start of the year, there have been a number of reports that have been out to identify, among others, how to draw more savers, more European savers, into investors in the EU financial markets. So my first question would be, why does it matter more than ever today for Europe to turn savers into investors? And what access should be granted to European retail savers? So Carmine.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thanks for this great invitation. And I would say let's start more broadly. Why, as you were asking, does it matter? I mean, we need to take an holistic approach. I would say both on supply and demand. Actually, that's why you just mentioned quickly the reports. For example, on Letta report that again, I guess we're having tonight a presentation by Enrico, the part on financial markets is savings and investments union, okay? And we had a similar approach, I would say, in the last reports, one year, the other, but also the Council, Eurogroup. Okay, we need both. So we need, in a sense, to have capital market grow, more direct and indirect participation of citizens. I always say that this is a question of financial democracy. Capital markets are important to grow, are important because, okay, in theory and in practice, obviously, having capital markets with all the different financial instruments can, help developing, long-term investments. We need this in the EU in particular for the digital and green transition. The EU Commission estimates, 645, I think, billion every year, to finance the transition. They are also historically, we've seen where capital markets are big. This is a chicken and egg, US, they were used to finance transition. So, but on the other side, so this cannot be done only by public capital, obviously, so we need private capital, but this is in the interest of the other side. And so imagine important investors, and okay, we will discuss also later, pensions and pension funds. This is exactly, the way to have growing capital markets long-term and in the interest of holders of these instruments. But to do that, obviously, you need appropriate, knowledge by those citizens going to financial market. And so an appropriate level of, financial literacy and an appropriate level of competence increases, financial inclusion in an appropriate way. So I would say this is the overall framework, and this is actually where we are also working a lot and supporting countries and also in general with standards. Back to you.
Thank you, Carmine. Philippe, I know that the AFG has been very vocal on the matter. So what's your point? What's your view on this?
We tried at AFG and for long already. Good morning, everyone. Let me just, and sorry for that, just challenge a bit the question. I'm not sure that the main point or the main target or the first target is to, let's say, convert the savers into investors, because as it has been said at the previous, during the previous panel, it will take 10 minutes. Huh? So, and I'm not sure that this is really appropriate, but at least and for sure, offering the right range of product, the right range of solution fitting with their needs, with their expectation, yes, no doubt. So coming back directly to your question, we all know that we have, let's say, growing needs in terms of financing the economy. But when we say that, we speak about innovation, we speak about transition, climate, blah, 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 all the transition, and defense now. So we have the growing needs. And on the other hand, let's say it depends on everybody's analysis, but we have quite high level of public debt, we can say that. So, of course, by construction, we need to mobilize the private savings for financing, and more, and this is now a key point, to mobilize the private savings to finance all these needs at the economic level. And we need that in Europe. So what is the picture? The current picture is the financial, let's say, the European financial markets account for only 11% in the world, to be compared with 45% for the US, for example. So only 11%, so close to nothing, yeah? Sorry for that. So we need, of course, let's say, thinking about the customer, thinking about the savers, thinking about how to finance the economy, we need also to develop and to create a virtuous cycle for developing, performing, and the right level of return on the European market. So developing the financial European market. Very much important. And this is, let's say, part of the proposal regarding the new capital market union. You are right, ahead of the reports performed by Mr. NOIA and Enrico Letta, the AFG wrote and proposed manifesto already a few months ago, beginning of this year, that we have been working on that last year and still today on different proposals. Because we strongly believe, and for long already, this is not a new point. We are very happy that now it is shared everywhere in Europe, perfect, but this is not a new point. We really promote, let's say, the European savings and how to finance the European economy for long, especially when we speak about SMEs. We launched an initiative beginning of this year at AFG, together with the Caisse des Dépôts, for, let's say, relaunching the, let's say, and revitalize the SME, the market, the listed SMEs as well, not only the non-listed, but also the listed one, because this is part of the solution for innovation and for, let's say, the future growth.
Thank you, Philippe. Olivier, we often hear that there is some excess savings in Europe and that these savings are poorly used. Is it the macro picture that you see as well?
Yeah, thank you, Adrien. So I totally agree with what just Philippe mentioned. Indeed, there is a striking contrast between the EU and the US. In the US, you have a saving rate at around 3% of the revenue for US retail investors, while, for example, in France, we are close to 18% of the revenue. So the big question raised by Carmine and Philippe is how to channel this additional savings above the level we had just before the pandemic, because we are still in an excess saving position, to SMEs, I mentioned by Philippe, but also to equity markets, I mentioned by the previous panelists. So the big question is to reassert this message, this very clear message that risk is not something negative. Actually, if you take risk as a possible return, that may help people, and especially less qualified investors, to better understand that in case they consider their long-term horizon for their investment, that may properly complement the public disposals and the public measures schemes already in place. So this is something that has to be very clearly communicated to all categories of savers. And for the moment, in spite of many release reports, we at Paris Europlace also released recently a report on that topic. This is very important to make this message clear. Otherwise, publicly granted savings products will continue to be predominant in Europe.
But do you feel that Europe has missed an opportunity to convert savers into risk-taking in recent years?
Yes, indeed. In our report, and this has been mentioned by the governor himself, in Europe you have an excess of savings channeled to the US. And what is important is to make these savings available for EU needs, for the twin transitions, but as mentioned by Philippe and Carmine, for SMEs' own funds. So this is a virtuous circle that has been to be implemented to help companies to find more easily money and to create employment jobs, and therefore the possibility for employees to increase their saving and to channel this saving towards equities in particular.
Thank you, Olivier. So let's move on to products, to standards, because that's something that is very core to the reports that we've seen out in the first half of the year. Philippe, what do European financial markets need to change in order to welcome more European savers? Do we need new funds, new standards? What do we need?
So it has been said, we export savings from Europe. As a consequence of that, of course, we need to, let's say, to not only to attract and to try to gather savings around the world for investing in Europe, but also how do we channel our own savings into the European economy? So very simple points at this stage to be mentioned. First, it has been said also already, but we need to, let's say, to enhance, clearly to improve the financial literacy in Europe. Why? Because not for, let's say, educating for sure, but not only for educating around the risk-taking and so on. Risk can be a good point, but if you speak about risk every day, of course you are adverse to risk. You become adverse. But if we speak about duration of your project, your own project in life, and not about risk-taking and so on, it will be a different. So we need to educate the citizens, we need to educate the people, not for, again, converting them into investors, but for converting them into, from middle of nowhere to educated savers. It's not the same. First point. Secondly, for that, we need to ensure an harmonized and consistent regulation across Europe. Stable one. We need this stable framework. This is absolutely to protect for sure the customers, but not only protecting the customers and the savers without discouraging the risk-taking, and also taking into account the competitiveness of the different of the underlying industries. And this is also a key point. We need to encourage, let's say, the competitiveness of the industries. The car makers can be the infrastructures, but also the financial services. We need very strong financial services in Europe. And of course, at the AFG, we try to fight and to propose on that point for long already. Maybe last point, and one remark just after. Last point, we need also to, let's say, to develop a range of solutions fitting with their needs. But when we speak about solution, and up to now, we speak about product, we speak about, let's say, hybrid product, but fitting with our need as producer, not fitting with the need of the client. So we need to be client-centric.
But so what does it mean in terms of product allocation, for example? Do we need to have like, European equity specific?
You are client-centric when you are able to customize your offering. So I just take an example, and I would like us to work on that, but just to share it this morning. We speak every day, every hour about Gen AI. Fine. So why not putting Gen AI in the center of the relationship between us and the client, not for improving the client relationship, no, for speaking about the client as an individual. They speak about their life, and based on that, we would be able, let's say, to propose a customized asset allocation, a customized duration, a customized level of risk. But this is key for the future. If we want to develop this European savings, investing in Europe, we need really to customize our offering.
But what does it imply for financial firms, for example, for asset managers, if we go, to the customization of portfolios and asset allocation? What does it mean for financial firms? For financial firms, for asset managers, for example, for the skills of asset managers as well.
But first, my first point is linked to what I just mentioned, is we are in a technology revolution. So we need to invest more and more in technology, and huge amount in technology, not only in this industry, but for sure in this industry. And this is the reason why at AFG we published two white paper regarding how, let's say, to accompany the technology transition, technology revolution within the financial services and within the asset management. And it will help the professional, and it will help the relationship with the client. First point. Secondly, there are quite simple, let's say, initiative to be launched. We have a very good example of, let's say, solution working and helping the customers, the savers, to build up capital for the future, for retirement, but also for, let's say, helping them or supporting them during the life cycle. For example, let's say, pushing and generating this is one of, let's say, this is our proposal alongside the CMU proposal. Generalizing this employees' savings is a pillar, could be a pillar, because it works very well. This is both education and accumulation for the savers, for the employers, thanks to the support of the companies. This is a very easy way, I would say, for let's say, promoting the European investment. First point. Secondly, we all know that we have issues regarding the retirement everywhere in Europe, especially in France for sure. So encouraging the retirement scheme is also a way for promoting, let's say, these solutions and products regarding this big issue for any citizen in Europe. And we also need, but maybe we will come back on that later, we could develop, and this is one proposal of the report performed by Mr. NOIA and the team, to develop the tax incentive in order to promote and to promote the European investment. This is really key. But we will come back on that.
We'll come to this topic later on the tax incentives. Bruno, what has been your experience regarding raising money from European savers from private equity point of view?
Good morning, everybody. So when I was working for the Treasury, I spent hours making speeches and trying to find solutions how to better use long-term savings to finance the real economy. We've been trying for years, designing new products, pushing life insurance companies to invest more in the real economy, even though we also need them to invest for govies, government bonds, right? So now I've moved from macro to micro. Macro à la micro. And I'm trying on a day-to-day basis, very concretely, practically, to do it. That means to raise money, in particular from individual investors, which is our topic today, to invest into small and medium companies in Cathay. Cathay has been, since the very beginning, raising money from individuals, actually. This is how we started 17 years ago, with individuals, entrepreneurs, their family, their friends and families, family offices, and small, medium, big. Now we have half of the CAC 40, which is totally different, and many institutional investors. But we remain very keen to have individual investors. And this is the first point I wanted to make. It's not about the volume, of course, compared to institutional investors, but for us, it's extremely important to have individual investors. It brings a different look. It's more entrepreneurial. And I guess they also like it. Otherwise, they would not come back, right? Investing in private equity carries risk. There is a capital risk. There is no liquidity for a couple of years, but brings a very significant yield. In the past, we have constantly delivered between 10 to 15 IRR net. So it's interesting also for individuals. And the second point I want to make is that it's very interesting to see the individual investors' reaction, what they are looking for. They are looking for return like everybody else. But they are also very sensitive to what we do with their money. Impact. The money used, the money raised from individual investors, what do we do with it? We invest in small and medium companies, in equity only. And we push these companies to grow. And usually individual investors, when they come to our general assembly, general meetings, they ask questions about the companies. Where have we invested their money? Are those companies successful? Are they buying other companies? Are they doing M&A and so on? So the use of money is very important for them. And I think it's one of the most interesting points in raising money from individual investors in private equity. We like it so much that I want to tell you that we are now fundraising our number 8 PE fund, and we decided to open a retail tranche that we are promoting with the support of Cyrus, that everybody knows, I guess, in the room, who selected us for the retail tranche of this fundraising. I really believe in the future of raising money from retail for PE, and I want to say how much I think the BPI France initiative in PE, retail PE, offering PE to everybody, is a great initiative, and I think it's going to structure the market. They have already raised a lot of money, and I think it's a very interesting initiative. I think the era where PE was only for very wealthy individuals is over. And private equity should be democratized. It should be open to retail individuals, retail investors that are not high net worth, very wealthy individuals, provided, and I guess we will mention it, we are very clear on the risk and very clear on the fees. So there should be an absolute transparency, but I think there is a great future for that.
And Bruno, there is something that has sparked a lot of reactions in France with the law Industrie Verte here in France. There is that private equity allocation that is mandatory in the law. So my question here is, what is your stance on that private equity allocation that is mandatory? And also, what kind of opportunities is it going to bring to?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier that we have been trying in the past many different schemes to push long-term investment into investing into the real economy and in particular small and medium company. This is the last one. And I support. I think it's a good initiative, but let me be very clear. You don't make good investments with legal constraints or tax incentives. It can be useful, but if you don't have the product, if your products do not make return, it will not work. So I like the government incentive to push more long-term savings into private equity, and I think it's a good initiative, but it's up to the industry, up to us, to propose, to design products that can be attractive enough for big investors, institutional investors, but also retail investors.
That is a good way to introduce the next topic, which is about incentives and fees for pan-European products. So France has a long tradition of putting some fiscal and tax advantage kind of everywhere in saving products. My question there is, if we are to set some new pan-European savings products, do you feel that this is going to clash with, you know, the culture of other countries? I mean, do we have like those tax incentives as well in savings products in other countries, EU countries? And do you feel that France is going to be like, you know, against the other countries in terms of?
Of course, every market has its own culture, and in the previous panel discussed a lot about the lack of financial literacy in France, which I fully agree on, and I'm not going to repeat everything has been said already. But nevertheless, I think things are changing. And again, you would be surprised to see how many people subscribe to the BPI PE proposition. And so I think people understand that investing in small and medium companies in the long term makes sense. So we should refrain from stereotypes, even though I agree that there is a topic of financial literacy. And I think it's going to work step by step, provided, again, there is total clarity on fees, like I hope it's the case in Plan d'épargne retraite now, for example, provided there is a total transparency on the level of risk. When you invest in private equity, your money is not liquid for a couple of years, but you will get a very good return. Provided everything is clear, I think it makes sense. And I think it's very interesting for the retail investors.
Thank you, Bruno. Carmine, on incentives and fees?
Just one comment on I think I disagree a bit with the idea that we shouldn't really transform savers into investors. I think we need to transform, I would say, first, citizens into savers. And this is a cultural issue. As Warren Buffett is always saying, you shouldn't save what's left after spending. You should spend what's left after saving. But then transforming savers into investors. And why? Again, risk is not a bad word. We know that risk is proportional, you know, and reward are proportional. But also otherwise, we will have, like today in Europe, basically a lot of money still on, you know, banking accounts. I mean, it's there and not. So, and this is because on the other side, again, if they are investors, direct and indirect, with appropriate knowledge, so, I think this is a very important issue, then again, capital markets, EU capital markets is peanuts. I mean, 10% or in absolute terms of world market cap, but also all the indicators of EU markets are much smaller than the GDP of the EU. Now, is the answer tax incentives? Okay, I don't like tax incentives as an economist. They're very distorted, okay? They can be used as a structural break, or they can be used sometimes if appropriately designed. I mean, everyone is talking about Sweden now. No? The Swedish one is the largest, you know, the stock exchange in Sweden is the largest stock exchange in terms of listed companies, and is the largest market cap in terms of the MTF. So they have designed, they have been used these incentives, but really what they have done is to simplify the process. And so this is both, you know, the tax, but also the non-tax part. The citizens, they do appreciate. If you have a smooth process, imagine, oh, we know, for all, even in the EU, cross-border investment, the withholding tax and all the other issues. So, okay, we can use them. By the way, Italy is also a country that have been used it a lot. I would say also it was a question of financial education. People are opening positions in pension funds, I would say due to the fiscal incentive, but then they use them as an investment fund, basically. We should also be careful that, the incentives are not swallowed with cost, hidden cost, or by distributors. Okay, so they can be used, but I don't think, and I agree that they are, the solution. It's not a silver bullet. They can be used.
Philippe, if you want to maybe answer.
Yes, thank you. No, but very much interesting, and this is, I hope, interesting as well for you. I disagree with your point on both points. First, I repeat, and this is what you said, converting European citizens first into savers, and then in investors, maybe in the future, but investing is a profession. You need experts, you need skilled people for investing. If by investing, we all understand that we mean picking the right company, the right investment, fitting with your need and your expectation. If it is for investing in, in Bitcoin or an index, okay, everybody knows how to do that. The second point is, I agree, let's say, at the starting point, I agree with your point. I don't like incentive, tax incentive. What is much more important is to make sure that you have the right offering, whatever is the offering, for the customer. But considering where we are today and the gap we have to cover between where we are today and where we go and what we want to reach, tax incentive, maybe at the beginning, so 4 years, will help to channel the savings where we need it, because we need it here in Europe. So sorry, before I end my phrase, I do not promote at all, we do not promote at all a kind of protection, how to protect Europe. This is not the point. Mm-hmm. And we have to, as mentioned by the governor, I think. But how to channel European savings and this high level, big amount of European savings into European economy and not financing only, I would say, only innovation elsewhere in the world is not only a key point. This is a strategic point for Europe. This is a subtopic of sovereignty for Europe.
But do you feel there might be some kind of competition between the French saving products and pan-European saving products? I mean, obviously, we've got plenty of products here in France, PEA and PIA, PME, and other products. But if we've got a pan-European, equity invested products, do you feel there would be a clash competition between, the ambition of those products?
But let's say, thanks to let's say the large industry we have in Europe, but also out of Europe, we have big players, of course, in the US, no doubt, but also coming from other countries, other regions in the world. We have very large offering. Fine, this is an opportunity for the savers, I would say, and it can go from let's say, pure equities, meaning listed or non-listed, which are investing according to conviction. They are high conviction driven. You can have a kind of hybrid mode, and you can also invest in index. Mm-hmm. So just one remark, do not confuse the envelope, ETF, and the underlying, because it can be passive, active, blah, blah. So I just speak about passive, hybrid, and high conviction. Hybrid meaning indexed, but which is usually index minus the fees. So based on that, we have a very large range of products. So unfortunately, for the moment, the approach of the regulators is through only, I would say, the cost. Only the cost. Sorry, but my conviction is this is the only product that we sell or buy in the world for which you pay a cost at the beginning, or you pay your cost every year, and you expect something that you don't know when you buy the product, because there will be a future return, which usually, when we speak about equities, can be index, can be conviction-driven, you expect a return, but you don't know it ex ante. So, taking or analyzing and setting the rules only based on cost is a wrong way. Is a wrong way. After that, of course, the competition has to be there. We have to be competitive everywhere in Europe, of course, and especially against the big factory. But again, we come back to the virtuous cycle I was mentioning before, how to ensure that we develop this virtuous cycle in Europe, going through, let's say, developing big companies in the financial services. Because in this industry, more and more, we say we need more and more private savings, but more and more size matters.
Sure. Thank you, Philippe. Olivier, any comment on incentives fees?
Yes, so regarding incentives, I think many very important mentions have been made by the other panelists. I think what is absolutely key is to take into account the fact that first you have very different financial culture across Europe. So you have to take this into account, even if, especially for young investors, we see big changes in the way young investors, young savers are investing. So culture is not something freezed or fixed, and this has to be rapidly changed. So taking this into account, I agree that, especially given the situation of public finances across Europe, this is difficult to expect a big tax incentive. Nevertheless, you have also to see that there is already a very large range of financial products just in France, but also in other EU countries. So we think, the French ecosystem largely thinks that this is key, not to create an additional product, but to signal that something different may be for voluntary member states implemented. That's why what Bruno BEZARD said regarding the impact is absolutely decisive, because you have to make the direction of the savings very clear, not only, of course, in the impact, but in the broad design of this existing, perhaps, product, but with something more clear in terms of tax incentive, when possible, again, for voluntary member states. So this is for the incentive. You have to not create something additional, but to take into account the fact that already there is a multiple choice available for savers. Second important point is regulation. As mentioned by Philippe SETBON, this is important to be clear regarding the way the package is presented. We are currently negotiating with French and European authorities regarding the retail investment strategy, the RIS. And we have in Paris, but not only in Paris, big concerns regarding the way this RIS, retail investment strategy, has been for the moment designed, with an additional bureaucracy, many additional costs, and the impossibility for the financial firms to properly advise savers. And we think that, again, if you like to make a synonym between risk and return, we have to make this regulation first stable and very intelligible for non-qualified investors. So we continue to explain to European authorities that the way the risk has been so far designed is not the best way to address the huge investment needs in Europe. What may be oppositely envisaged is to encourage even very young people, children, to save a small amount of money every month or every year, and to begin at the very early stage of their life cycle to better understand what is the impact of their behavior. And second, very important also things to have in mind is to encourage the competitiveness of the EU financial industry. If you don't have qualified, competitive and strong financial firms across the EU, that may be impossible for financial advisors to channel properly these savings toward the twin transition, and of course company, not to forget that in France we have the highest number of companies in Europe, so we have a special needs also in France.
But yeah, Bruno.
I have to say that personally, I'm not a big fan of tax incentive. We have so many inefficient tax incentives. We have tax legislation, which is a nightmare, even for people who are in charge of enforcing the tax legislation. It's too complicated, it's not stable, it changes every year. Tax incentives are usually inefficient, and they are swallowed by the industry, and they don't reach the final taxpayer. So I'm very reluctant. I know there could be some exceptions, probably for the PER. I think the tax incentive is probably efficient, but I'm quite reluctant for the reason I just mentioned, inefficiency, and also because we cannot afford it. And tax incentives, they cost a lot of money, and usually people say, oh, it's not a problem. We are going to recycle tax incentives. We are going to delete one tax incentive to create another one. But you know what happens when you want to kill a niche fiscale? Sorry, I will switch into French. Si vous voulez tuer une niche fiscale, vous regardez la niche, et en général, dans la niche, il y a un chien. So you never kill niche fiscale. They just proliferate. And at the end of the day, you have a Code Général des Impôts, which is 5 kilos, right? So careful with tax incentives.
So what would be the solution then for you if we don't put any tax incentives? What would be the solutions? Would that be low fees? Would that be...
Good products, clear about the impact, clear about the level of risk, clear about the fees, and good return.
Okay. Well, let's go back to financial education, which is kind of the elephant in the room, if I may say. So that financial education that must be strengthened to allow more European savers to understand financial markets. So Carmine, I'd like to touch on the OECD framework that has been out, I think, last year for youngsters, for adults. And so what about the implementation of that framework across the EU? How does it go into application?
Yeah, we have been actually working a lot in all these years. I mean, I joined 2 years ago, but I was a commissioner in the Italian SEC, in Consob, and also the work that many also in the EU have done has been important. I have to say OECD was basically had a task by G20 in 2013, the INFE, the Network of Financial Education, which is with us of building these competence frameworks that we have done in the years for adults, children, youth, and also SMEs and small enterprises. Because the question we talk about financial education, we really need investor education, but we need also enterprise companies education. But this is recently we have updated the framework for adults and also for children and youth with a nice presentation with Maureen McGuinness. And so this is an EU framework, OECD EU. And what is this? It's a framework which basically is dealing with saving and investment on the one. So on the one side, basically touch upon, and this is interesting, it's very nice, kids are divided into 3 clusters between 5 and 18 years old, and then the 2 topics that they should really know and how really to teach them, okay? So really very detailed, because this is an issue. So, and how also, so first to set, saving targets, and then how to choose, what to save and how much. And then the investment part, because then young children, the Gen Z, then we can talk maybe later, but they are those that are investing, exposed also to an easy way to investing. So, and this is important because this framework in many countries, including here, where we're working a lot also with AMF, Italy, that are now laws that basically chose to have financial, education taught in schools as a topic. They are, relevant in a framework of the EU, and the retail, you mentioned the retail investment strategy. Then I take the point that maybe there can be many costs, and maybe, as you were saying before, in some cases, unintended consequence of regulation. I was a regulator, may keep actually some distance from investing. Is difficult to have even professional investors on demand, the prospectus, all the other things. This is relevant because, first of all, it is important for every country, and not all EU countries, and not all very important EU countries. They do have a national financial strategy, okay? It's important, and we're working on that, from Germany, for example, okay, there are issues, political issues in some countries. Is this competence of the regional level, lender in that case, or the national level? But we have been developing now with Finland, Croatia, and so on. The other part, why is relevant, again, because you need then financial education programs, and actually it's important public and private, sector working in many countries is at the treasury, there is coordination. But then also to assess then the level of financial literacy, because we always like to be evidence-based. So this is very important then to design the appropriate programs. To create trust, a big issue is then who is teaching the teachers, because then this is, imagine the skills and so on. So we are doing that. Then obviously each country has its own specificities, and that's why then we work also at the level of countries. And okay, maybe now or later I can tell you something about the French experience, given that you are here. But
I'm just curious about the children. How did they react to that framework? I mean, I'm sure that you've met some when presenting the framework. So how did they react?
Well, it was funny when we presented, and so again, we were the commissioner, Deputy Secretary General of the OECD, myself, and, there were 3 kids. Obviously, they were instructed specifically what to ask to us and what to respond to our questions. So at a certain point, the commissioner asked, okay, so are you happy to one of them? Are you happy to have now financial, education, financial literacy at school as a topic? And he said, no. Now, he was instructed to say yes, obviously, because this was the purpose. And then so moment of silence, the commissioner was, frozen for a moment. And then he said, but why no? No, but we cannot now study another thing. If you replace with something else, then we are happy to have this. So, but this is obviously, we need to go also close to them with also the way of communicating with children, with youth. Honestly, you were talking about, advising, but, these kids, by the way, in France, the new investors, so those who enter the market after COVID, okay, 25%, and this is like 10% of French population, so it's a lot. And a quarter of that, they are between 18 and 24 years old, and another third is up to basically 35 years old, so it's a lot. And these are people that do not take into account the normal, publicity, the traditional advice, we were working. I mean, they use TikTok, we need to go, they use apps, they want simple things. They invest more. In France, the number of young people investing in equity actually is half of the number of young people investing in crypto. So it's the message that we have to, I have 3 kids, and okay, they never understood what I was doing, a commissioner of a consul, what is a policeman, or I was working in the Italian AFEP, what is this, a lobby. And then the only case when they came home, 2 of them said, Papa, we're proud of you, you're great. Why? You are on TikTok. Now, honestly, TikTok. I didn't know. And you know what? I mean, I was unaware. A video of myself in black and white, by the way, but I'm not so old. And, but talking about financial education. So, and other kids. So it's important to go closer to them, to try to improve it, to have then wise savers and maybe wise investors. I take the point that is a step.
So do you think we need a special approach then for those Gen Z savers, Gen Z investors?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is actually what also some regulators who are working again with G20 and others. For example, Brazil Central Bank is on TikTok, just one. And all we need really. I mean, I speak everywhere. I don't, I never am afraid of a conference. I think the only also time for me when I was worried, when I went to the school of my kids, talking to 15 years old people. I mean, I said, we will be bored, so I'll try to be fancy. By the way, next week, on the 27th, we will present, and you will see They are worrying. The results, you may know what is the OECD, the PISA test. They are all over the world of, for math. We will present the subset of PISA for financial literacy, 27. And honestly, we should be worried. Right. So we need to also to invest more and with a coordinated approach. Otherwise, we are targeting, the wrong issue, because these are the investors not of tomorrow, of today, and the fintech divide, digital divide. This is not static. Now we have programs, and then we can solve with issues. But this is a moving target, and actually is widening, because the apps and things are developing. So it's really very urgent to act.
Thank you, Carmine. Philippe, just as for adults, what do we need? I mean, what can asset managers do in terms of financial education, and what role basically should play?
So this is a large topic, and we just got an illustration. No, AFG is for the AFG. This is a key point for long already. We are very much involved in the how to improve the financial education, but for years and years, because this is really the underlying for, let's say, promoting and ensuring this conversion, as you said. I agree. So, for example, in September 2019, we published a white paper dedicated to financial education in order to help, to support the decision-taking for individuals, how to invest, and let's say the best way for investing in the financial market. During the last years, since my election, thanks to, let's say, all the experts of the AFG, also thanks to Eric Pinon, the former chairman of the association, we are very much involved together with let's say, all the public authorities in trying to make more understandable all the financial topics for the citizens, for the population, for the savers. But listening to you, and you are absolutely right, there are so many newcomers after the COVID, which is a very positive signal. I do share. This is a very positive signal. Very young newcomers. So we work for long on the financial education. We also have to work with them through the same channel that they use. Otherwise, because our concern is this very positive signal should not become a very bad one in the future, meaning without, let's say, being directly an investor, and not a saver, but an investor, without the right level of financial education, is just gambling. It's just gambling. So we have to take care of that, and we have to pay attention and to pay time for let's say, supporting them, not educating, but supporting them in their choice and the way now they invest, which is new, which is quite new, thanks to whatever it is. Huh?
But does it mean you would be willing, working with influencers, for example, with all influencers of finance on what that we see on social networks? Do you think AFG should work with them?
Absolutely. For example, but I think we should really consider very seriously this way of communicating, this way of supporting. Yes.
And just on the point of Carmine on who teaches the teachers, do you think asset managers should be involved in teaching the teachers on financial competencies?
As well, but we already do that with institutional investors, huh? No doubt. But I strongly believe that the first mission of the asset manager is to generate return and the right level of return for the clients. Maybe we can share the roles within the industry and together with let's say the public authorities as well. Huh?
Thank you.
And not only for the adults, but starting very soon, very early at school.
Thank you, Philippe. Bruno, how complex is it for savers today to understand private equity and the mechanisms, because they are rightly different from what we see, you know, from public equity investing, for example. So is it that difficult? And would you be like willing also to come in front of youngster adults to teach them private equity?
Actually, I will maybe surprise you, but I think it's much more easy to understand than government bonds. What do you do with government bonds? Proceeds. How can you explain this in 1 minute? Private equity, you raise money, somebody's going to invest, I don't know, 1,000 euro, or maybe much more. This money, you know exactly where it goes, into investing into, for example, 15 small and medium companies in France, Bordeaux, Marseille, Toulouse. You, in which sector, you know what the company is going to do, you know if it failed, or if, because they fail as well sometimes, if it succeeds, and you have your return, and you have a very clear impact. I don't think it's so easy to explain what the government does with the proceeds of government bonds. You can believe my experience. So I think actually it sounds like a provocation maybe, but I think it's much more easy to explain and much more easy to understand. Then people, retail investors, have to be aware that if you want return, well, there is a basic law in economy. If you want return, you have less liquidity. Okay? So the public is used to an absolute liquidity, even for so-called long-term products like life insurance, which are totally liquid, actually. So people have to be aware that to get very high return or reasonably high return, you need to accept a lack of liquidity for a couple of years. But I'm sure with the context of Industrie Verte bill, the insurance industry is going to work with the management companies to design new products where you can have a certain level of liquidity, not complete, and also have the good return that the private equity can provide to investors. So I think products are absolutely simple. This is why I don't like so many incentives everywhere, because it makes the products actually even more complicated, and people focus on the incentive. They forget the basics and the economy which is behind. So let's have pure product driven by economic performance, and that will work.
Just would you say that reports of private equity funds are easier to understand for savers compared to you know, traditional funds at the moment?
Well, I'm not making any comparison in terms of quality of reports. Any management company, every management company has its own habits, and I guess reporting has to follow a certain number of guidelines. I'm just talking about the economic mechanism which is behind. I think it's much more easy to understand, because you invest in company, you put equity, and you make them grow. And it works, and sometimes doesn't work, but globally speaking, it works well. So it's easy to explain. When you talk about, when you invest in life insurance, the money goes basically into govies, main parts, even if governments have been trying to decrease. But at the end of the day, what is the impact? It's very theoretical, very abstract, diluted. When you invest in a fund, you can see the entrepreneurs. You meet them.
Yeah.
And you see where your money has been directed to. I invested 1,000 euro. Well, 10% of this money has been fueling the development of this company in Marseille.
Yeah. Carmine, you want to?
This is the case. There is a lot of greenwashing around, but I have to say, and young generations are very interested in whatever they are, sustainable bonds, green, social, and others, because they may see where maybe the money is going, but also we have a lot of interest. We had one of the largest issuance last year in Europe for retail. Was Eni, the gas company, Italian, one of the largest market cap. This was a sustainability linked, by the way, offered like the Treasury is doing for many issuance in Italy, directly on the platform, so directly to retail. You see the book of the Treasury when you buy that. And this was sustainability linked, 1 billion supply, basically it was 10 billion requests by retail, and then they closed it at 2 billion. So there is, because this is your point, there is also interest in seeing where the money is going, and sometimes I like your point, is not so easy to understand maybe from a government. Okay.
Thank you, Carmine. Olivier, you've got the last word on.
Just a last point. This is very important to have a stable and clear regulation. You mentioned social media, Carmine. So indeed, the current regulation is probably too much focused on investor protection. So seeing risk as something negative. So now the opposite could be true. As you mentioned, the very interesting survey run by the OECD and the IMF regarding the share of French investors, so twice higher in crypto rather than equity. So thanks for this survey. So this is very important to have this in mind and to therefore include fin influencer within the regulatory framework. And last point, what is currently done by the AFG, the French Banking Federation in schools, beyond the PISA survey by the OECD, and also done by the French Central Bank, is also very important to educate very young people from the school. So this is a long fight, and we hope to, year after year, try to have a strong result.
Well, thank you, Olivier. I think time is running out, unfortunately. Thank you very much to the panel, and I hope that was insightful for you all.